The awqaf is gonna push the state away from the civil society business, and that is very important. In the past, if you're gonna mix the awqaf with the zakat, it was the state that collected the zakat. Today, you really don't want the state to collect zakat. You want to take away some of the powers of the state, because the modern state, nation state, is too powerful. It gets into everything in your business that you do. You want to breathe air, tells you the standards of the air is this and that. You want to drink water, you want to, spank your child. The state gets it, tells you, no, don't spank. So it becomes quite problematic. So we want to make sure that the zakat is going to diminish the powers of the state, and a healthy state should be happy with that, because this means a bigger civil society, a more vibrant. Let people take care of themselves. Let people build hospitals and take care of the homeless and so on, without necessarily knocking on the door of the minister to do that, and so forth. And therefore, there is a lot of room for that. I invite you to read the paper, because there might be some ideas that is worth discussing, and we'll take your questions. Please, go ahead. تفضل. عربي إنجليزي تفضل.
Can we back to the first point?
أوقاف.
Yes. Because I have a small problem with the first one.
Where?
Yeah.
Which one?
No, this. The other page.
This page?
Yes, the first one. Can I ask in Arabic?
Translate.
أنا حاسس إن في مشكلة مع مشكلة تمويل، المشكلة الأساسية للمؤسسات الإسلامية غير مسيسة وغير تجارية. يعني وكأن أنا طبعا عارف المغزى بتاع السؤال، لكن إحنا بنرسخ في بعض الأحيان عند الناس إن إحنا هذا الفصل بين إن السياسة جزء من الإسلام أو مش جزء من الإسلام أو كده. ولو إحنا بنتكلم في مقاصد في علم المقاصد يعني وكده، فأحسب إن هو يعني لو يعني في كثير من الأحيان وكثير من البلدان بيبقى اللي ممكن يتكلم باسم المسلمين أو اللي بيتكلم عن المقاصد الخمسة، أو اللي بيدافع عن المقاصد الخمسة للشرع يعني أو كده، بيبقى ممكن يكون حاجة مسيسة، يعني حاجة هي في طبيعتها وفي تركيبتها وفي دعوتها سياسة. فهل في هذا الوضع يعني يبقى احنا موضوع الوقف عندما نوقف شيء لمثلا لحركه معينه زي ما حضرتك بتتكلم عن الحركات الاسلاميه او لحزب معين او كده، وهذا الحزب لو قلنا مثلا في مورو في الفلبين او مثلا في كشمير او كده، ويكون اللي بيقوم على امر المسلمين هي حركه اسلاميه لا حزب سياسي، ما يقدرش يفصل ده عن ده. هل في هذا الوقت موضوع الوقف يبقى فيه حرج يعني؟
تمام. جزاك الله خير. The question is about the point here about major problem with non-politicized Islamic institution. My brother is saying that politics is part of Islam. So when there is an Islamic movement or Islamic organization, it is doing politics on behalf of Muslims, on behalf of the Islamic opinion in politics, which is a very important opinion. And therefore, the waqf here in that sense, if it is serving an Islamic movement and the Islamic movement has a political party, it is serving an Islamic cause. It is not making a disservice to Islam. How can we say that Islam is a way of life and then we separate it from politics? So that is the question. My answer on this is I don't know. My answer to this has to do with how do you define siyasa? How do you define politics? Is politics trying to acquire a part of the state? Like, what is this state? What is it trying to do? Is it a genuine state, or is it a state of colonization? هل هذه الدولة دولة حقيقية أم دولة مستعمرة؟ يعني. And if you are going to be part of the political scene of the state, how wise is this? Like you mentioned the resistance, Islamic resistance in a number of countries. Sometimes the Islamic resistance is justified because you are fighting occupation, etc. And sometimes the Islamic resistance is not really serving the cause of Islam because it is entering a lost battle. Like you mentioned, for example, in the Philippines. I've been to the south of the Philippines, the areas where there is curfews and all of that, and spoke with some of the people who believe that the southern parts of the Philippines should be different and should be sovereign, and they're fighting and so forth. When I met with them, I asked them, okay, so now you separated the southern part of the Philippines. Do you have any natural resources? Do you have, like, how can you establish a state? Like, this is just the state now, and then what? The state is Islamic, but you have no borders except with the bigger state, and you have no army, and you have no economics, and you have to be realistic as an Islamic state. Otherwise, you are going to be a rogue state, and you're going to be, but how about you enter into negotiations with the, say, one of my students, he did a thesis with me, and he was proposing this. I'm giving the long story to say that politics is part of Islam, but it doesn't mean necessarily that every Islamic movement has to do politics. يعني السياسة جزء من الإسلام، لكن ليس بالضرورة أن كل مؤسسة إسلامية أو حركة إسلامية تشتغل بالسياسة. لأن السياسة لها سقف، يعني depending on the ceiling of what you mean by politics. And yes, politics could be struggling in an election and could be struggling in the battlefield, but it depends. Can you fight? No. Can you have a free and fair election really seriously? Or is the election really is a show? It's a show. And because you don't have teeth, or you don't, not necessarily teeth in terms of violence, but you're not powerful enough economically, media-wise, research-wise. You don't have a TV channel to deal. So sometimes there is a problem in mixing the comprehensiveness of Islam and the comprehensiveness of the Islamic movement. شمول الإسلام وشمول الحركة الإسلامية. Yes.
ما هو احنا مش هنقدر نوصل اذا كان دي مقاصد للشريعه، فلا نستطيع ان نصل الى هذه المقاصد. يعني حماس مثلا على سبيل المثال، لن تستطيع حماس انها تصل الى انها تعمل دوله، او ان هي يبقى لها جيش او يبقى كذا، الا بدعم مادي. دلوقتي المال عصب الحياه.
صحيح.
فهي لا تستطيع ان تؤدي لا دعوه ولا جيش ولا دوله الا اذا كان في دعم، والدعم ربما يكون في صلبه موضوع الوقف.
صحيح. يعني you mentioned, my brother is mentioning Hamas, and really cannot do any of its what it's trying to do without support. And waqf would be very important. Yes, I'm not saying that Islamic movements should not do politics and should not do resistance. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that they have to do it based on a strategy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is best not to do it. You see, I really can't speak about Hamas because I am not doing any resistance in the way you do. So I find myself, let's say, incapable or unqualified, غير مؤهل لنقد هذه الحركة. حركة شريفة تشتغل في المقاومة. يعني إيش مقاومة بهذه؟ So I really, when I don't do any resistance myself, I am not qualified to speak about the strategies. When they recently have a debate in the Arab world about Hamas and its relation with Iran and so forth, as a board member of the Union of Muslim Scholars, I mentioned that we really cannot give fatwa to Hamas because we are sitting in our comfort. They are on the battlefield. They have their own fatwas and they do their own thing because this is easy. But sometimes it's important to step back as an Islamic movement and assess the strategy of the situation. تقييم الاستراتيجي للموقف. This is problematic given what we were talking about, the engineers and doctors. Like sometimes they don't understand strategy. They've never done strategy. They have never been part of a government, and therefore doing strategy. And therefore, people who are more clever in strategy, even if they are shaitans, but they're more clever in strategy, they eat them. Because if you are not part of a government, strategy making is very complex. There has to be some training, there has to be some steps in order for an Islamic movement to rule a country properly. Look at the Turkish example. For example, as an Islamic movement, they were not able to rule the Turkish society except with a long history of experience and a long cycles of violence with the army generals and many hangings along the way of leaders and so on. And then eventually they are ruling and they're still struggling with it, you see. So I totally agree and respect the action. Yes, I got it.
So if I understand the question correctly, I mean, it's about why on certain occasions you have to be non-political or apolitical.
Yes.
Is that the essence of it? So I have a very elementary example, a very basic example. So if you look at the rules of international human rights and international, so when like the Red Crescent, Red Cross goes into a war-torn country, you cannot, by definition, have engaged in Bashar Assad versus the rebels. You have just to go in and look after people. So irrespective of whether they're Shia, they're Sunni, they're Kurdish, they're Daesh, or whatever it is, you are by definition non-political because you're providing humanitarian aid, you're providing medical aid, you're providing tents, right? So at a very elementary level, by necessity, you have to be apolitical. And I think like at a more elementary level, when it comes to education, housing, healthcare, it's an imperative, right? Because if you're